And so do you ever think about how, do you ever think about how that mission then not only influences your method, your way of doing things, but influences the scouts and their method and their way of doing things? But how does that inform the culture in scouting? And how does that inform the communities that we serve? And I'm going to talk a lot about how all those pieces are connected together, and they are in every business. So we'll talk about some definitions, and some of this is pretty straightforward, right? So that mission statement really should be something that's really short. It's usually a phrase, it's a statement. Sometimes you see organizations that have 2 paragraphs for the mission, but it really should be something that you can walk away and that you can remember. And you don't need to refer to something that's hanging on a wall or look in a scout book or write it down and carry it with you, because it should be something that drives everything that you do and everything that you say. So it's what is our purpose? What is the ultimate goal? What's the ultimate outcome of scouting? So it's really our purpose, but it's much more in a statement. And that's really what I'm here to talk about. There are lots of organizations that have really remarkable missions, and you read them and you feel warm and fuzzy, and you get a sense of the folks who started that organization, that those founders had a vision of where they wanted to make an impact in terms of the services they delivered or the products they produced. But it doesn't mean anything if you don't act on it. And that is the method. And so we'll quickly learn, if we haven't already, what the mission is. But the rest of the conversation and all the rest of your work is that looking at how does your method every second of the day that you're doing scouting, that 1 hour a week, how does that drive you towards that mission? So the method is exactly what I said earlier. It's every decision that you make. It's every interaction. It's your convictions. It's what you stand for. It's your definition of success. It's the workspace design. It's the culture. It's all those things that drive your organization towards the mission. And so if you're not focused on your method, and if you're not doing things in the method or consistent with your mission, then you're not going to achieve your mission. It literally becomes something that's hanging on the wall or that's in the scout book that's not achieved. And we talk about that being incongruent. So it's just a little summary on this slide. The mission is what we're trying to achieve. The method is how we're working towards achieving that. And so the question is, if you know the mission and you look at scouting at every level, so look at that 3rd paragraph on there. It says that mission should be seen in the method of all adult scout leaders, of all scouts, at all levels and at all times. And that's really what you strive for. If you have a mission that you believe in, that drives your organization towards that product or towards that service, then that method has to be congruent with it at all times. So we're going to talk a lot about what happens when that's not congruent. And I really like this little picture because the mission is kind of where we start our journey, right? It's why we set out to do this. It's why Scouts BSA was developed all those years ago. And on the far right-hand side, it says the scouting program. And that's where we're trying to deliver, right? But we can only get there when the method is the bridge between the mission and the outcome. And so that's why we're going to talk a whole lot about the method. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to start with the mission. So the mission of Boy Scouts of America is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetime by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and the Scout Law. It's to prepare young people to make ethical and moral decisions. That's really the crux of the mission, to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetime. Now, when you look at the Scout Oath, and when you look at the Scout Law, There are action verbs in there because it's what we do to achieve the mission. On my honor, I will do my best. It's a verb. When you look at the Scout law, a Scout is trustworthy. A Scout is always prepared. A Scout does a good turn daily. Those are our methods that drive our mission. Does that make sense? And we say that all the time, but I won't ask folks to raise their hand, but how many of us really know that the ultimate outcome is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices? So when we say that Scout law, and we say the Scout oath, and we say to be prepared and do a good turn daily, those are our methods, our actions and our words that drive us towards our mission. Make sense? All right, so here's what I'm going to ask you to do, because this is about taking a look at all of us, me included. And so I ask you to take a moment. Most of us have worked today, might have had long days, might have had frustrating days, may had a drive to get where we are now or to get back home. And so this is something that we do in therapy. We say, take a moment, center yourself, ground yourself. Take a moment, just kind of feel through your body, feel those tension points, clear your mind, and push that out through the base of your feet. Feel your feet on the floor, feel your butt sitting on the chair, and imagine that you can just push out the stress and the angst that you may have had today and make yourself available for today. One thing I'm going to talk about is that our tendency is to get defensive. We all do it. I do it. It's hard to really take a look at yourself because it's scary. One of the things that I learned in therapy is, and I'll challenge all of you to think about this, is that almost everyone that I work with knows what they're doing that works and doesn't work. Therapy is not about the aha, like, oh, I didn't realize that sometimes I'm annoying. We usually know that, right? It's the change that's hard. It's getting past that defense and being vulnerable and really taking a look at yourself. And so I challenge all of us today that are here, that are virtually, that may be watching this recorded later, to really put yourself in the space where today you can challenge yourselves along with me to say, does my method inform my mission? Does my mission inform my method? Okay. And part of being vulnerable is that none of us are perfect. That's the best part of what we say every day when we start a meeting. I will do my best. I'm not perfect. There are people in here that can easily sit me down and say, Mike, I remember the one time you were a little cranky, you were a little tired, maybe you were a little short, and that's okay. In fact, when I talk about parenting, I readily admit that I am not the perfect parent. I know that surprises you guys, but I'm not the perfect parent. And nor do I think it makes sense to try to achieve being the perfect parent or to achieve being the perfect Scout leader, because there is learning and doing your best. And there is learning in being able to say to someone, I didn't do it as well as I wanted to, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to do it differently next time. And isn't that part of the role modeling that we do for Scouts? And isn't that part of the role modeling that we want Scouts to do with each other? So no one in here is perfect. And it fits well in our method to say, I will do my best. And so I ask us to think about that, because that can help us offset that tendency to be a little more defensive than we need to be. So a lot of this starts with feedback, right? And feedback is challenging because that means that we have to hear it from someone, and someone has to be willing to give it to us, right? There's a two process to that. It's circular. I can give feedback and someone receives feedback, and then they can give me feedback on the feedback that I gave them, and the cycle continues. And so it's really important as whatever our interactions are, whether it's what I'm talking about today, or whether it's with people in our family or friends or people at work, is that ability to see feedback as a precious gift. And it's something that's talked about in Wood Badge. That doesn't mean that all feedback is helpful. It doesn't mean that it's all right. And there are some times where it's hurtful. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to receive feedback and then how to evaluate it and make those decisions about, is this feedback that I need to sit with, and that it is something that I can do something different with, and that it's valuable that someone was willing enough and vulnerable enough to give this to me. And certainly, though, there's feedback we need to reject. And so my favorite first step is absorb the first punch. And I talk about this with folks all the time, that absorbing the first punch is literally just listen. And it's so hard for us to do that, right? We've all done that, where we've been in a conversation and we want to interrupt. We're already thinking about the next 5 things we're going to say. The problem with that is, and you all know that because you've been on the receiving end of that, is that when someone is trying to interrupt you and someone is trying to ask questions or tell you that you're wrong and you haven't finished what you're saying, it's frustrating. And oftentimes you'll stop trying to give the feedback because you know it's already not being received. So you can't hear it, and the person giving it is getting the message that you're not interested in it. And so the challenge is to just absorb it. And if I'm being blunt, I always say, you got to shut your mouth and listen to what the person is saying. And you can see I quoted some stuff here from Wood Badge and a participant that went through Wood Badge. And just that process of realizing that the tendency is there to be defensive, to reject it, to say, that's not me, you're wrong. Who are you to tell me? But feedback is valuable even when it comes from an 11-year-old scout, as it does from a 65-year-old scout. And so that ability to then just absorb the first punch and hear what the person is saying and be present for them, and to realize that it's a gift that they're giving it to you. And so I was joking with Sarah earlier, and I'll joke with other Sarah now, that your names actually made the presentation. There's a little acronym here to remember some steps. I'm actually not going to go through that one. I just thought it was fun to put it in there. But you can see that that one starts off with stop talking. And so I have a little 4-step one I'm going to give you that matches this one, is that, so that the one I'm going to go through, number 1, says validate first, that you have to look at the person that's giving you the feedback and ask yourself, how does this person know me? And what do they know about the thing that they're talking about? And are they a good person to be giving me this feedback? Well, if another leader is telling me something, who's also been a trained scout leader, that's validating, right? If it's a scout in the program or a scout's parent or a community member where we're doing service, there's some validation there, and I'm interested in that. And I should really be interested when it's my customer. And as an adult leader, I have a number of customers. The scouts are my customers. Their parents and guardians and loved ones are my customers. And our community and our church that supports us and charters us are my customers. So even validating the source still starts with absorb the first punch, stop talking. Hear what the person has to say. Fight that urge to interrupt before they're done. Fight the urge to ask questions or tell them they're right or wrong. You don't evaluate yet. You just validate first and stop talking. And then active listening is great. Let me see if I got this. Let me repeat this back to you. It's something that we don't do very well, and something that I have found in the 30 years that I've been doing therapy is the number one problem that brings folks to therapy is they don't know how to talk to each other. How many times in therapy, when I can get folks to use this model and stop and listen and use active listening and repeat back to each other, how many times in family therapy, a couple or a family has said to me, I didn't realize that's how you felt. I didn't realize that that's what you were telling me. We're not really good humans at listening to each other and being able to then repeat back what we've heard to make sure that we got it right. And then you can assess and really look for the defensiveness. It's really nice when someone's talking to you and you've repeated back, and then you can get to the, I'm not sure about this. But it's really, again, going into, okay, I'm being defensive. What's that about? Usually it's because it's hard for us to be honest with ourselves. And our tendency is, but he told me to do it that way. I had to do it because of this. One time Sarah told me to do it that way. You know, we tend to like externalize rather than just saying, wait, this is someone who is doing the same program that I am. Let me hear what they have to say. Take a moment to identify where they're coming from. And you can listen for where there may be misunderstanding or there may be assumptions. But when that person feels heard, it's a lot easier for you then to go back and say, here's my experience of what I was doing, or here's why I did what I did. And because you have stopped talking, validated them, and appreciate that they're coming from a position where they know the kinds of things that you're doing, we're all in scouting together, it makes it easier to get through that defensiveness. And then the big thing really is, it's not all about you. And what really helps when you keep the mission close to your heart is that it's much easier to go back to, why are we doing it this way? Why am I getting the feedback? How does that feed back into the mission of scouting? Preparing our youth for ethical and moral decision-making. How does that help? And how does it help our customer, who is the scouts that are joining, who have joined? How does it help our new leaders who are joining and have joined? How does it help our communities where we're going out and doing the things that we do in our service? And it's really hard at times to say, this isn't about me. There are times when we should reject feedback. You know, obviously, if someone tells you to do something that's illegal or immoral, if they're being derogatory about your personal beliefs, the last paragraph on here is really hard. It's really hard to be centered in this kind of scenario, because there are times where you're getting really good feedback, but the way it's being delivered to you is condescending. It feels mean. Someone is yelling at you. Someone is being impatient with you. They're saying it to you in front of 10 other people. They're saying it to you in front of 10 other scouts. And so it's important when you are, taking a look at that you can separate, I don't like how the person is saying it, but what they're saying is valuable information. And that can be challenging to be able to separate that out. And sometimes, I know for me, sometimes I just need to walk away, get myself centered a little bit, and then come back and be able to get to the, not how it was said, but what was said. All right, so let's get to the nitty-gritty here. So what is our role as adult scout leaders and leading through our mission? And really where I start with is, and you've all are trained scout leaders, are we taught any differently in the scouting program than the way our scouts are taught? And I'm hoping you all know the answer is no, right? When I think about the outdoor leader training I did, I was taught how to tie knots. I was taught how to start a fire. I was taught how to work with frozen bananas in 0-degree weather. Oh, that's just because it was really cold. With the cook boxes and everything that I was taught is the exact same way that I see our scout guides teaching our scouts. Is there any difference? Can anyone tell me? I know you can't see everyone in the room or online, but is there any difference between how leaders are taught and scouts are taught? We say the same oath, the same law. We should always be prepared, do a good turn daily. Is there any different? I'm not seeing anyone tell me there's anything different. You know, it's interesting because we talk about this in therapy too. So is there any difference in how a therapist should talk to other people than how people talk to people? Right? Like therapy is not like this big magical thing. Like the way that I talk to someone in therapy the way, meaning just the relationship way, the way I connect with people, the words I use, the tone I use, really shouldn't be any different than how I talk to my lovely wife and children, right? Or other scouts. It's not something magical. It's actually just doing many of the things I've already said in the PowerPoint in terms of, absorb the first punch, repeat back your understanding of what you're hearing. So many of our things in life and many of our things in our businesses, it looks no different than how the leaders are taught, than how the workers are taught, right? And so you can look down through here and you can see all those things we talk about, and I'm not going to read them to you, but I did highlight a couple, and I'll talk about the first one, which is set the example, because we talk about that so much with our leadership in scouts, right? They're scout led. And don't we talk to our assistant patrol leaders and our patrol leaders and our assistant senior patrol leaders and our senior patrol leaders about leading through example? Is that different for the leaders and how the leaders interact with each other and how they interact with the scouts? Or is that the same? Do we want scouts to be able to look at us and see that we're doing the same thing that we're looking at them for? And so you can read down through those. Those should all be really familiar, right? I need to make the slide a little bigger. And so, and actually we do, and again, if you have access to the slide deck, it's something you can do, is that they actually tell you to go through here. And on the next slide, they say you can actually score yourself on those, and you can see how well you're doing on those. And I like that it jokes a little bit. And it's like, oh, if you got a 10 out of 10 on all of them, you're probably not being honest with yourself. So go back and do it again. All right. Because none of us are perfect, right? But nothing on there should be a surprise, right? Those are all the values of what we ask scouts to do. Do we ask ourselves to do this? Do we hold ourselves accountable to lead like a scout? So I found this and I thought it was interesting, is that, what makes a good leader? Google's fun. You can find all kinds of neat stuff on there. And so Scouting Magazine wrote this article a number of years ago. And they interviewed a bunch of folks and said, what makes a good leader? And again, I'm not going to read all this to you, but I like the last comment on here that, a good leader for scouting is made. It's work. That's why we go through the training. That's why Keith's talking to us about Wood Badge. And it takes constant work. Our work is never done. One of the favorite approaches that I like in therapy says that we're always self-actualizing. We never finish the product. I'm assuming that no one in here thinks they've got it all sorted out. I know I don't. It's a journey, and it's a continual journey. Let's see if I can get the slide to click here. There we go. So just some things, right? So it's being a good role model, which we talked about. It's about the trust is earned by listening and following through on promises. You can see a lot of it, like listening to what other people have to say. Not doing things that go against your own values. I like the football analogy here in the middle, that it talks about, if you follow football at all and you see Army and Navy, they don't have their names on the back of the jerseys. They just have Army and Navy, because it's not about the I, it's about the team. It's about that the group has to work together to win the games. And isn't that what a patrol does? Isn't that what a troop does? Isn't that what a district does or a council does? We don't have big names on the backs of our shirts. We have a lot of big patches, and they all look the same across their shirts. And I've heard our leaders talk about that when we step out in the community, we want folks to recognize our shirts as scouts. It's someone who works along the scouts, not hiking ahead. The leader is not standing there telling everyone to do all the cleaning in the bathroom while they're eating a ham sandwich sitting on a lawn chair, right? that the best leader is when you can't figure out who the leader is, because they're right there next to you doing it with you. You can see here, it's being respectful for the person you are, not for the patch on your shirt, right? It shouldn't be that you have an eagle patch versus a tenderfoot patch. We want to see that the scouts are engaged in the program and supporting each other, and that every scout has something to offer regardless of the rank. So I'm just letting you read through those. I'm not going to read those all through for you. But this one I made a little bigger and wanted to talk to you guys about because it's about kindness. And there's a lot of programs in schools right now that are, the Be Kind. They're the anti-bullying programs. And we think about like just how different our world would be if we just focused on this one, right? If folks can recognize that they're frustrated, that they can take a moment to calm themselves and center themselves and overcome their frustration and just be kind to each other despite of the difficult situation. And we're living in a world right now where that has become such a challenge for folks, hasn't it? There are so many conversations that we can't have because folks can't have differences and still be kind. You don't have to watch the news very long. You don't have to watch politics very long. You don't have to watch a hockey game very long to see that folks are having difficulty working through conflict, working through disagreements, and just being kind. And if we just worked on this one, how different things could be. And it's hard, right? We've all been frustrated. We've all had rough days. It's hard taking that deep breath before saying anything. It's hard to not respond and be defensive. It's hard to take a moment, listen to what the person is saying, and be able to respond in a way when you walk away, they can say, I was able to hear what that person said, and I didn't get lost in the fact that they weren't kind. So basically, the point here is that we are taught as leaders exactly the same way that we teach scouts, and that the way that we do things in our oath and in our law directly informs our mission. And so our process begins with looking at ourselves in the mirror and that realizing that our leadership directly informs our business growth and the healthiness of our business. And I'm going to talk to you about my experience in going in and turning around organizations, and that this is the very first thing that we focused on was the method and how that was informed by the mission. And so for us, right, if we have congruent method with mission, and we're congruent from the leaders to the scouts, then that's going to directly impact our scouting programs and how well they run. It's going to directly impact how we recruit scouts. It's going to directly impact how we recruit volunteers and our fundraising, our community image, our leadership recruitment, our culture, and our parent engagement. And I think we all know that we're in a time where folks aren't going outside as much. We have a lot of kids who have had difficulty adjusting away from the technology, especially after a couple of years of COVID. And I sit in a restaurant and I've actually watched siblings and parents talking to each other on the phone while they're sitting at the same table and laughing and then pointing and talking about, like, I knew they were talking to each other and they're actually sitting at the same table having a meal together. I see more and more kids in my practice that are depressed because they don't go anywhere. They're not getting out. They're on their phones. Yes, they're socializing, but it's through playing a game with earphones on their heads. And we know that we have more and more sports that now require kids to do that sport year round, right? I used to play on the swim team and it was like 9 weeks long. But now if you're on the swim team, you're expected to join 6 other leagues, do it over the summer. And then the football coach gets mad because you're swimming all the time. And when I look at my friends that are involved in football and wrestling, and his boys were really good at both of them, both coaches said, you need to pick one sport over the other. And so we're challenged now with, how do we bring folks into scouting? And what I'll tell you is that when our method doesn't match our mission, then we're not going to be able to recruit the scouts and the leaders that we need. And I'm going to talk more about that. So we're going to talk about this correlation. So I'm going to get into some fun terms here. These are terms that actually come from biology, but they use them in family therapy, and it's called isomorphism. And basically what happens is that isomorphism says that when one thing is happening, it influences everything else around it. Real simple, right? If you have nails on your driveway, it's going to influence the tires on your car. And if you drive away with 3 nails in one of your tires, one flat tire is going to influence the rest of your car. And what ends up happening then is that as 1, 2, 3, 4 people start to drift in their method to their mission, it pulls everyone else into that unless you are mindfully and actively stopping it. So here's the story I like to give, and this is why I believe the bullying programs don't work in school. I can sit with a group of teachers, and those, I know some folks are teachers in here, and I could sit with guidance counselors and I can sit with students. And I've done this. And I said, raise your hand if you know who the bully is in your school. Everyone knows. The teachers know, the principals know, the students know. You know how they know? Because they've seen it. They've seen the kid being bullied. So you have a school with 300 people in it that are seeing a child get bullied. And what happens is that almost nobody says anything. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on teachers and guidance counselors or principals, because there's a couple of them and hundreds of students. So that's not really fair. Let's talk about the students. You're in a hallway with 50 students and a kid's getting bullied. What do you think would happen with bullying if 50 kids surrounded the one kid and said, this isn't going to happen? Versus 50 kids not saying anything because they don't want to be part of the problem. They don't want to get involved. They don't want the bully to pick on them. That's the me thing, right? If I think about just me, and I think if I say something and no one else says something, now the bully's got me. But if 50 people all agreed to say it together, we wouldn't have a bully problem. Imagine if all 50 people in that hallway said, we're going to be standing outside waiting for you, bully. And we're going to have a little chat with you when you come outside the school. Bully comes out to school, the 50 kids are standing there, and they said, listen, the next time you pick on Sally, all 50 of us are piling on. You think we'd have a bully problem? So isomorphism is that we give folks who are toxic a lot of power. And a lot of times it's because they may be in a different social economic status. They may be a little wealthier. They may be a little more white, a privileged class, a little more male. They may be big. They may have parents that don't follow up with them when they go home and the school is called 15 times to say, Billy's not behaving in school. And so isomorphically, those people who aren't doing what they need to do become more powerful. Imagine what would happen if 50 kids were standing outside the school when the bully walked out and said, the next time all 50 of us are piling on you. Would we have a bullying problem? So isomorphism can go both ways. We can influence when we all say we're not going to tolerate that. But when only some of us say we're not going to tolerate that, or few of us say we're not going to tolerate that, then isomorphically, our mission drifts away from the method. It's not congruent, right? The method and the mission don't line up. And so what we say, right, in our bully programs is, hey, if you're getting bullied, you should tell someone. Everyone already knows. Why are you telling anyone? Everyone knows who the bully is and they know you're being bullied. Try to walk a different hallway. Imagine in scouting, we said, well, we know your patrol leader's really doing horrible things, so join a different patrol. So we look at this in therapy because what we see oftentimes is we look at parent and child interaction. That's what brings them into family therapy. And oftentimes when that's really messy and folks are yelling and screaming at each other and they're not listening to each other and they're threatening each other, they're putting hands on each other. Oftentimes what you'll see is the therapist is upset and frustrated. And when I do supervision with therapists, I listen to the words they say, because if they're saying, I don't like this family, I'm not really looking forward with meeting with this family, isomorphically, they've actually taken on the same dynamic as the interaction that's happening between the parent and children. And so just like I'm saying in scouting, we have to pay attention to how we're interacting with scouts and how scouts are interacting with scouts and how adults are acting with adults. It's the same thing that we do in family therapy, because if the therapist looks like the family, then we're not going to be able to help them. And I've actually walked into treatment team meetings. One time recently, in the consulting work I got, there was a room and there was a bunch of folks in there. And they came and got me and they said, Mike, it's folks are really out of control in there and we need you to go in and calm folks down. That was my introduction. I didn't know who the people were. I didn't know what the case was about. I had never been consulted before. I literally walked in a room and people were screaming at each other. Everyone was screaming at each other. I had no idea who was who. And what was really unfortunate is that once I got people calmed down, there were 5 people in the room. 3 were family members and 2 were professionals. And I could not tell the difference. That's not good, right? So I actually ended up de-escalating not only 3 family members, but I ended up de-escalating 2 professionals to help them get back on track to work. So we look for that interaction because it's isomorphic, right? How are we going to help a family when the professionals are doing the same pattern of interaction? And so I challenge you to read the second paragraph, because we're looking for isomorphism. What's the influence between these groups when we have scout leader to scout leader, when we have adult leader to adult leader, or adult leader to scout leader? Are there times when you've looked at a scout leader, an adult scout leader, and thought they're out of control, or that they're out of control as much as the scout leader is, or the scouts are? Has there ever been a time when you've had to step in and pull a scout leader aside and say, I think you just need to take a break? How are you going to help the scout if the leader is role modeling the same behavior? Now, so isomorphism can be good, but it can also be toxic, right? And so when it's good, what happens is that we have a group of people to come together. That's why we're all here today. And then we're working in different alliances, right? We're in different troops. We're in the same district. We're in the same council. And we're working towards those shared goals. And it makes sense that we're here to do what's right. I mean, we're here, we must believe in the scouting mission, and that we're going to act together to obtain the organization's mission. But remember what I said, the evil is that it's really hard to look beyond ourselves. The tendency is, I should be the next scoutmaster. I should be the next district committee member. It's hard to look past yourself. And so there can be drift. And I have some little funny cartoons down there. I like the doctor that's smoking a cigarette while he's talking to the patient about not smoking. So, and so isomorphism is always being transmitted constantly. And it pushes for status quo, and status quo can be good or bad, right? You can have status quo where it's really not working, and you have status quo where it's really working. And really what's important is, and most folks are familiar with this, implicit versus explicit, is that, so we talk about our trainings. We talk about, what Keith taught us recently and what badge with all his instructors around, what we should be doing. So that's explicit, what we're taught, what we talk about, versus what we actually do, which is implicit. And it's important that we look for that incongruency in terms of, because most of us pay attention to, and kids especially, pay attention to, they do what you do. It's interesting to me how many times I'm in family therapy and a parent says, I don't know why Billy's using these swear words. And I'm thinking, I just heard you use 15 of them. Why would he stop swearing if you're swearing? And so again, when we look at that last paragraph in blue, is that we want to look at that adult scout leaders influence adult scout leaders influence scout leaders influence scouts, and scouts influence scouts. It's all isomorphic. You can't teach something explicitly if you're doing it a different way. And so this is how it works, is that when you look at the mission and method in yellow, right? Mission is, what's our purpose? What are we trying to achieve? The method is how we're doing it. It's not a top-down problem. It's not a bottom-up problem. It's not a middle to the edges problem. It is a problem that we should all be paying attention to, because we're all influencing each other, and it's all isomorphic. And then it doesn't stop there, because obviously how we lead, how our scouts lead, influences our service delivery or product, depending on what kind of business you're in, and informs the customer experience. So it's all the way down through there. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about was that when an organization becomes undesirable. So part of my career was that I would go into mental health agencies that were losing an enormous amount of money and were about to close their programs down. And they would, A, not be making enough money. B, they would be not in compliance. So auditors were not happy, insurance companies and state and county auditors. They had people quitting. They didn't have enough people that wanted to go work for that organization. They weren't getting referrals. They were broken and losing a significant amount of money. And what I want to impress on you is that when I went in, this was the first thing I focused on, was what's your mission and what's the method towards your mission. And I had a lot of CEOs that were like, why are you talking about this? Fix the financials, hire more people, fix the compliance. And I would always say, you can't do that. That's not how it works. If people don't buy into your mission and they're not acting in a way that drives them towards that mission, then nothing else is going to work. It's like you work at a BMW dealership and you hate BMWs and you're selling bicycles when you're on the street away from work, or you ride in on a bicycle and you're like, I don't like cars. I mean, how do you sell something, the method, that you don't believe in? Can you do that? Can you really deliver something that you're not fully engaged in and that makes 100% to you and drives every word and every action that you take? And so what we did was we focused on that mission versus method. And when we got that fixed and we got people to believe in what we were doing and believe in the services we were delivering, then everything else came in the line. The financials came in the line, the auditing came in line, the referrals came in the line. It all came in the line. You always had to fix this first. And I'll tell you, I had one CEO in particular who, isomorphism was impacting him as well. He's like, well, you're trying to change everything. And I said, isn't that why you hired me? He's like, but we always did it this way. Isn't that why you hired me? Like, it's not working. Like, you're telling me this program is going to be closed in 2 years if we don't fix it. And I actually said to him at one point, so you have to make a decision, because if you want to keep doing things the way you're doing it, isomorphism, then you don't need me. But you hired me because you said you wanted to fix it, and that means we need to do something different. So I really want to say, if you're kind of wondering, like, wow, Mike's spending a lot of time talking about this method informed mission. That is what drives everything else. If we have a recruit problem for scouts, it's because our method doesn't match our mission. If we have a recruitment problem with volunteers, it's because our method doesn't match our mission. If we're having trouble balancing our financials, it's because our method doesn't match our mission. It's always the way that we fix those programs. Mental health programs don't make a lot of money, so this may not sound tremendous to you for some of you guys that are working in big business, but the last organization that I fixed, in 2 years, we turned it around by $1.83 million. I'm sorry, $1.38 million in 2 years. And we started with this, that when people were excited about coming to work and believed in the work you were delivering and lived in that mission through their method, everything else came into play. So that's what that slide says. I'm not going to read it to you, but that's really what this is about. And what you're going to see and what you're going to hear is it is really hard to fix it, because people don't like to change. It always surprised me how many people say, but you're changing everything. This isn't the way we do it. I'm like, it's not working. Why would we keep doing what you're doing? As I said to the CEO, if you want to keep doing what you're doing, I'll leave, but you brought me here to fix it. And you brought me here to fix it because I've done this in 3 other agencies.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Just because that brought up, how many times have you guys in your packs or troops heard, but we've always done it this way? They don't want to change. We've always done it this way since 20 years ago when the troop started. We've always done it that way.
And to be clear, the only thing that I ever was interested in changing was when the method didn't match the mission. So the program may not be the problem. It may be the way that you're delivering the program that's the problem. I didn't have to spend a lot of time teaching therapists how to be therapists. I had to teach them how to deliver it in a way that matched the mission. And so that's the goal here. On this slide, it talks about that we have to overtly and mindfully model that mission in everything that we do. And at the end of the day, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in that last paragraph, is that we have to root out the bullies, because our bullies go unconfronted and they take over our culture. So how did this training come up? I was sitting in a meeting in an undisclosed location with undisclosed people from Scouts, and I was sitting and listening. And after about the third conversation of this person, this leader did this, and it was really hurtful and it was really nasty and it was uncalled for. And then the next conversation was the same thing. And then the next conversation was the same thing. I raised my hand and I said, do you mind if I say something? We're talking about Scouts. We're talking about leaders who were taught the same way that Scouts are, that are responsible for the ethical and moral development of Scouts. How do we do that if the stories we're telling are about leaders hurting other leaders or Scouts? How do we deliver our program? And I'm willing to bet that everyone who's listening to the presentation can think of times when they saw that happening. That's going to be the problem with delivering the program the way it needs to be delivered. That's going to be the problem with recruiting new leaders and volunteers. I have sat in committee meetings where either I wanted to leave or I actually intervene to calm people down. If you're a new leader that's coming in and you see that, it's going to be hard to raise your hand, right? Do you want to be part of that? Do you want to be the person that confronts the bully? So that's why I bring this up. And what happens is, just like I talked about the bully, is we need 50 people to say that's not okay. And the way that we always did it is, I always believe that you train people first. You give them really good feedback. You train them first, you support them, because I believe people are good. I wouldn't be a therapist if I didn't think people were good. And if I didn't believe people weren't capable. But at the end of the day, you also need to move people out of your organization or into a position that's a better fit for them, because you cannot allow them to change your isomorphism to a toxic environment where your method no longer matches your mission. And I'm sure you can all think about folks that you know are not a good fit. And why do we keep them? And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But I used to have therapists say to me, you know, all the good people are leaving because they know better. You ever been in an organization where the good people keep leaving? Who doesn't leave? The folks that are killing your program are the ones that stick around. And how many of you have heard in an organization where the good employees say, they just keep giving me her work because she's not doing anything. They're all afraid to confront her. I just saw a bunch of heads nodding, right? Like, she doesn't get in trouble, but then I get in trouble. I asked to have an extra half hour for lunch. She's gone for 2-hour lunch, and they said no. Or she was allowed to work at home yesterday, and I'm never allowed to work at home. They're all just afraid of her. I hear that all the time. In fact, just go sit in a doctor's office and listen to people talk behind the desk while you're waiting for your appointment. You hear all kinds of gossip about each other. I hear that on a regular basis. And so we allow those folks to have too much power and control and stay in an organization at the expense of losing our mission and losing good people. So this talks about why it works, right? So we see those places at work, and I'm going to go back to kind of the other side I was touching on, but what makes it work is when an organization really is just driving, people want to be there, they're excited about being there. It can be hard work and you can still like being there, and you believe in the mission and you believe you're doing good. And it's not like you can have the best selling fleece and the most delicious ice cream and the best location, but if your method doesn't match your mission, no one's going to go. Read the story about Rollerblades. Rollerblade was the brand name of the original rollerblade. And they lost their business because of their method got off from their mission. Some of it was their employees were stealing money from them. That was a problem. Look at Apple. Apple lost its method and got off mission for a while, and then it recovered. How many of you have some form of an Apple product on you right now? They made a massive recovery because they got back on mission. All right, so be mindful of time. I know we started a little bit late.
Yeah. We started about 10 minutes late, so
Okay.
we're right about an hour now.
I have about an hour?
No.
Oh, no, I have about, what you said, 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, about
Sit down. Okay. All right. So basically what I like to say is that we really got to be focused on finding those folks that are not on method and retraining them, repositioning them, or inviting them to go do something else, because they will harm our organization. It's hard to address those people because generally they've worked for the organization the longest. They're not leaving. Your good ones are leaving. And so they're generally in leadership positions. They generally are doing a lot of work, but how many times have you said, yeah, he does a lot of work, but he's hard to work with and he drives me nuts and I feel exhausted after I talk to him. And so the question I always said, is it worth the work? And is it worth what it's doing to your organization? My attitude was always, I'll take a green therapist than anything. I'll take a hungry green therapist that wants to learn than the person who's sucking the life out of me every day. And I spend 90% of my time dealing with problem employees and 10% spending with performing employees, and that's backwards. I want 90% to go my performing employees. But that's the natural tendency, is that we don't stand outside with 50 people and wait till the bully comes out and says, no more, no more. And that would literally fix the bullying problem. And we all know who they are. Oh, what's going on here? All right. So one of the things we talk about is Dementors. I don't know if you're familiar with Harry Potter, but the Dementor is that person that just sucks the life out of you. And if you watched Harry Potter, if you haven't, I have a little clip in here. I'm not going to play it. A lot of stuff I have in here is for you to go back to later if you'd like to look at it. But I really like watching the Harry Potter stuff and towards the Dementor, because they find you and they try to partner up with you. You ever have the person that you know is not they're the bottom performer, and they're like, hey, let's join forces together, and they just suck the life out of you and your organization. So this is a really nice metaphor in terms of these things that I'm talking about. Their goal is to reduce you to something like itself, isomorphism. All right. So I want to just wrap up here with some thoughts, and I'll also show you a little video that will finish up our time. So there's a lot of great articles around method versus mission. I have some of those linked in here. Really, again, I wasn't planning on reading all this stuff to you, but I put it in there. You can go on your leisure and look through it and see what those organizations have done. But this is the guy I want to talk about. So Paul went into an organization and he said, we're going to do this differently. And he went into a financial institution that believes that you have to be cutthroat to make money for your organization and for the people that you serve, your customers. And he said, no, I don't believe in that. And he came up with a no a-hole policy. You can see highlighted in blue. And he said, I actually believe that we can be nice. And that by being nice, we can do really, really good business, and our customers are not only going to get a good product, but they're really going to like the people that are delivering the product. They don't do that in the financial world. For the most part, they still don't do that in the financial world. They like to interview people to come in that are aggressive, have really expensive suits on, drive BMWs, and are going to make them as much money as possible. And what he proved, and actually there's a lot of research that proves, if you read the Forbes articles that I put in there, that you don't need to be an a-hole to be really successful in the financial world. And the proof is right here. Read the middle paragraph. When he first joined the firm in 1994, revenues were $215 million. It's a lot of money, but look down below. By the end of 2019, revenue surpassed $2 billion. And you can see the other things in terms of they had 1,300 associates in 1994. They had 4,600 at the end of 2019. And I'm going to let you see a little clip about him. But he basically, his company year after year after year became one of the Forbes listed best places to work as a financial institution, one of the very few financial institutions that made the list. And what he demonstrated was that when they lived the mission top to bottom through their method, and that they could be kind and caring and not be a-holes, that they actually could deliver better business and outpace their competitors. And when there was downturns and the government was rescuing financial institutions, they laid off nobody. All right, so a little disclaimer. I'm going to play a little bit of a video clip here. So it does have a swear word in it. It's going to be a-hole, but they're actually going to say it. So if that, seriously, not to go against Boy Scout policy, right? This is for adults. If folks that are online with us have kids in the room, I give you the disclaimer. You can mute. You might want to step away. But I am going to play a little bit of a video. They do say the swear word a few times to make their point. Certainly for folks in the room, if you want to step away, you can do that. But I just want to give the disclaimer. It's a really good documentary. It's won a number of awards, and it talks about the state of our society in terms of how people are treating each other, and it directly relates to businesses and their method versus their mission. So just want to throw that out to folks. I'm going to go ahead and start clicking through this. So the name of the documentary is Assholes of Theory. It's actually a book and it's a documentary. All the information is on there, all the links, how they made the documentary, all that fun stuff is on there. If it's something that you would like to go back and watch the whole video, on the right here, I have left, sorry, I have different parts of the clips that I think are valuable, but I'm hopefully have enough bandwidth, thank you, to get this to run. So, and hopefully it will work. Are you able to see it?
Mine's on a delay.
Okay, I just want to make sure folks can see it.
Let's see,
All right.
or just you have to share a different screen, Jesse.
Are you seeing it
They
or
all
not?
do if they stay in that echo chamber.
Well,
Alright.
I think we do need
Does
to
he have
do
to
a lot
share
of
that
work on
screen?
right now.
All right.
Since it's, yeah.
All right, hold on a
Baird.
second.
you'll-
A
we'll have to
multinational
share
wealth
screen again,
management and
probably.
equity firm.
So stop
sharing.
sharing. Share.
Yeah. Here.
So I just want to make sure I had the sound. Okay. All right, just bear with me. All right,
There we go.
so, sorry.
We're good.
All right, so is there going to be volume on one of these? Or, all right, is there volume on mine? Yeah, let's see what happens. All right, here we go.
With client investments of $77 billion, their philosophy is carved into the woodwork. Trust, teamwork, respect, and a no-asshole rule.
Literally
Hold on
the
a
day I
second.
got here, I put into place.
It's saying full volume. Is there no speaker on here, Jesse? Or?
The European Union took
All
action,
right,
suing Google $5 billion for antitrust violations. It remains to be seen if U.S. regulators will follow the European lead. With Silicon Valley or Wall Street companies is a challenge. Here at Baird, a multinational wealth management and equity firm with client investments of $77 billion, their philosophy is carved into the woodwork. Trust, teamwork, respect, and a no-asshole rule.
Literally the day I got here, I put into place the no asshole theory. One, we're not going to hire or tolerate anybody who puts himself ahead of the firm or the clients. And we're going to only do business with people who are high integrity. When I'm recruiting people, I tell everybody the same thing. I say, hey, look, if you're an asshole, don't come. We'll figure it out and we'll fire you.
So where did you come up, like the use of the word? Could we talk about the use of the word?
I know, I just did. Because I kept calling all these bad people at Kidder Peabody assholes. And I said, I'm not going to work with those people anymore. One of the reasons I came to Baird with a smaller firm is to get away from that, to be perfectly honest.
It was controversial. There was some conservatives in the firm who were like, oh my gosh, you can't say that out loud. And then there was others that you could tell just loved it. It is what it is, and we talk about it openly, and some people will temper it to the no jerk rule, but a lot of people have gotten used to just saying the no asshole rule.
It begins with the respect of every individual, and that is the core value is every person, what they do, what they accomplish, what they add to the enterprise is core to our success, and every individual is important. And when you have that basic respect, then you can build trust. And our business is all about trust. And if you build trust, and you do that long enough, then you build a certain pride that creates an energy and dynamic of its own. But the foundation is the respect for every single individual.
When we interview people, we ask our receptionist who meets them all what they thought of that person as they were waiting for 5 minutes. And we'll hear the stories of they were rude, they were condescending, and we have said no to people.
Yeah, look, I can't tell you the number of conversations I've said, you're right, Joe, you're really special. You're so special, you need to work someplace else. And you mean that. When you do, people cheer you because the greater good prevails. And it's a winning strategy for us.
The strategy is working so well, they are number 4 on Fortune's 100 best companies to work for, and the top financial firm on the list.
The firms that are in the top 100 and a great place to work outperform their peers 2.5 to 3 to 1 in terms of returns. This difficult behavior by Wall Street-oriented larger firms is a huge plus for us because we're very different. Here at Baird, 2 out of 3 people are shareholders. So what we say to people is, it's your firm. Behave accordingly. Protect your firm. It is a very powerful message. You're an owner. Protect your franchise. And you make people accountable.
So what if you buy 50,000 shares of the thing?
It's that long-term orientation that is that's missing from most of Wall Street.
You're on the periphery, it's out there in the morning.
You know, in 2008 and 2009, one of the beautiful things that we were able to do is not lay anybody off. And they were throwing tens of thousands of people out between September of 08 and March of 09. And that we kept our trust with all of our associates. And then we came out of the downturn just roaring. But it goes back to how you were raised when it was all said and done. You know, were you raised in a family with really good core values? People go, I can't be that simple. Like, it is. You either have it or you don't. And you can't drift. You can't drift. In the asset management business, we call it style drift. We cannot drift. We need to stay back. And every time there's a big issue we need to, we go back. Is this consistent with our core values? And if it is, you do it. If it's not, you don't. It's really pretty simple. But it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of focus because, you know, they're like, wow, just this one time, right? Like, no, can't do that. And then, because if you do, then people won't trust you.
So I'm gonna flip to one more, whoops.
JC tried gain flings for
I'm
the
gonna
first
flip to
time
one
the
other
other
part
day.
here, once we get through the ad. So each of you are in part of a small business. It's your truth. It's your truth. Run it like it's your truth. It's the same message in the business model, right? So I'm gonna play one more thing. This is gonna play an ad here, but I'll skip through it.
The scent made quite an impression. It was like that towel and JC were the only 2 left on Earth. But they weren't.
Really
You
good
can
one.
always spot a first-timer. Gain flings with Oxy Boost and Febreze. Seriously good scent. Bye-bye
Commercials
tough
brought to you
odors.
by Scouting.
Try Gain Odor Defense.
Usually I get a skip on mine, but it's not letting
When
me
our
skip.
daughter and her kids moved in with us,
Laundry commercials is very
She
good
was
for
worried
scouts
we
because
wouldn't
we
be
know
able to
after
keep
summer
up.
camp,
So let me
what
just,
their clothes smell like.
so I have one more piece I want to put in and I will finish it on time here is that, you know, so the message here is I challenge all of us, and I say all of us, including me, to really read through that mission, look at the method and ask yourself, is there congruency? And is there congruency from the very top person in an organization? And I'll show you a graph to finish this up, all the way down to our customer experience and everyone in between. Because if there isn't, then we're not delivering the product that we started out to deliver. And it may be causing some of the pain points that we're feeling right now in terms of trying to recruit more scouts, trying to recruit more leaders. If you leave a meeting and you're frustrated and you're exhausted and you're talking about that one leader, it's your business. It's your truth. What are you doing so that doesn't become the new isomorphism? And I have a little clip here to show that, and I have a slide or 2 to go over, and then we'll wrap up on time. But this makes me almost cry every time I hear it. Come on.
You know, if you walk and you see somebody being asshole with someone, with a woman, with a girl, with a dog, with a gay, with a transgender, with an old people, with a foreigner, whoever, and you decide just you pretend you haven't seen, then you are the same asshole like him. If you decide to react, then you are doing something really big. Like a little stone, you know, in a pool of indifference. Little ring that go wider and wider and wider, can reach longer distances.
All right, so need to stop the sharing. Spouses. Oh. Back here. Okay. So I know folks in the room, you couldn't see it, and I apologize. Did I just click on the same thing again? Oh, I got to get rid of this.
Just.
Here. All right. All right. So I know folks, unfortunately, you couldn't see the video in the room, but we did get it online. So you'll be able to take a look at this. So this is the graph that I was talking about. And then we have to look at ourselves at every single level, because any person at any level going in any direction can be that little pebble that changes our ability to stay on method to live up to our mission. And it goes from the CEO all the way down to the community experience. And so I challenge all of us to look at that at every level and to weed out the dementors. You know, the Toyota model talks about, if you want to know what's not working in your organization, go watch it. Go sit in a meeting. For those of you that visit troops, instead of talking to folks when you go in, sit in the corner, watch a meeting. Go to a committee meeting, watch it. Go to a planning meeting, watch it and listen. So one of the things that I do when I get ready to consult, and it drives people nuts when they first meet me because I say nothing, and I'm the last person to sit down in the room, because I want to see where the family sits, who sits next to who doesn't sit at the table, who doesn't sit on the same side of the table. And usually by watching the interaction, I can tell what their isomorphism is. You can too. And you probably already know. The question is, can we step in this space? So the Toyota model says, if you want to figure out what's wrong, go talk to the employee that's doing the work. Go talk to the scout, go talk to the leader, and you'll quickly discover what that is. Just sit down, listen to a meeting, and you'll see it. This was just a funny little thing, and I know I'm running out of time now. So, but I sent an email. The one on the right is what I sent to Northern Tier, and I asked a question about whether we went to Canada or not. Another question was, what time and date does the open registration start? That's the response I got in the right. No, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. We look forward to you. Glad you're looking into the program. Not even a goodbye. And I didn't even get the time that the registration opened, which is a direct question I asked. On the left is from Blue Sky, who works with troops to get them in and out of high adventure camps. Look at the difference. We look forward. Glad. Thanks for reaching out. All kinds of really polite interaction. And that's in scouting, the response that I got for someone who's trying versus someone who's trying to do business with me and our troop. So you can always go back and take a look at that. But this is one of my favorite ones, and this is my closing. And you probably have all heard this Scoutmaster Minute about the boy who has a terrible temper, and the father says, you know, you need to put a nail in the fence for every time you lose your temper. And he drives 37 nails into the fence. And eventually the little boy realizes this is a lot of work. And he learns to get his temper under control. And he says to his father, look what I've done. This is great, right? The father says, yeah, you've really done a nice job controlling your temper. Now, every day that you keep control of your temper, I want you to pull a nail out of the fence. And so for the next 37 days, he pulls nails out of the fence, and he comes back to his father and he says, look, I've been able to keep control of my temper. And now I'll read the part at the end. He says to his son, you have done well, my son, but look at the holes in the fence. The fence will never be the same. When you say things in anger, they leave a scar just like this one. You can put a knife in a man and draw it out. It won't matter how many times you say, I'm sorry. The wound will still be there. Thanks for listening to me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. One of the ones that he was talking to, hence why he was here to do his presentation.